Welcome to the SimHanger. My name's Mark, the SimHanger for all things flight sim related, and today we're in Prepared version 5.1 with hotfix 1 applied, and we're in Switzerland. We're on the western banks of the Swiss Alps, and we're going to be doing a number of short hops. We're going to be departing from Orbx Saanan and following the valley down and then to the north to our first stop, Griez. And then from there we're going to be heading east across the mountaintops and landing at San Stefan, and finally a 4 nautical mile short hop up the valley to Semen. All 4 of these airports come with the Orbx Saanan airport. We're going to be flying VFR in A2A's Comanche 250, one of my favourite prepared aircraft. Prepared version 5 was released in April and featuring DirectX 12 API from Microsoft. Version 5.1 was recently released, addressing a number of bugs predominantly, but with development on the enhanced atmospherics, along with performance improvements. So I thought it was time I jumped in and took a look. I had originally planned to fly this route in VR, but I had to scrap this idea as I was having difficulties in version 5.1 with hotfix 1 applied. Not sure if it's me or the program. I'd be interested to know whether you're having problems or not. Please leave your experiences in the comments below. We're departing from Saanan, single runway 1,400 meters long at an altitude of 3,300 feet. External checks completed, so come on, jump on into the co-pilot seat and let's get going. It's time to get started. Doors locked and secured, master battery on. The Comanche 250 has 2 fuel tanks. Let's open the valves and get those both open. There's the left and the right tank now, valves open. It's the beginning of winter and we've got snow on the ground, although it's not too cold at the moment, between 4 and 6 degrees Celsius. A little bit of high cloud, that shouldn't bother us, and not much wind to speak of. Mixture fully in and now fuel pump on. And we're just going to prime the engine. She's been stood for a little while, but 2 should be enough. Lock that back in place, and we can now put our beacon light on and switch our mags over to both. We're about ready to start. Just check there's nobody in the vicinity of the prop. Clear, and let's press the starter switch. The A2A Comanche has AccuSim and is not always the easiest to start, particularly when it's cold. Let's crank that throttle a little bit. There we go, that's better, and we're away. Almost ready to taxi now. Let's get the pitot heat on, and we'll just check that the carb heat is working fine. We'll just pull that out. Rev slow, that's good, that's what we want. And now we can put on our strobes and our landing lights as we're going to be moving straight out onto the runway. Avionics are on, but we're not going to be using any navigation or GPS, purely visual flight today. We're looking for a west departure, so we're going to be departing from runway 24, initially following the valley and then turning north towards Griez. For short hops in the Alps, the Comanche 250 may not be the first or most ideal aircraft that springs to mind. It's a fast and fairly powerful aircraft. However, it's very responsive, can climb quickly. It does require a little bit of speed on the approach and final touchdown. Certainly not a stall aircraft, but a challenge nonetheless. Let's see how we go. Pressures and temperatures looking good, plenty of fuel, and it looks like the battery's charging. Let's just close this window, it's a little bit noisy. There we go. Slowly push the throttle forward as we gain speed, and for takeoff today, because of the altitude, I'm going to be looking for something between 75 and 80 knots. Flaps are 1 notch down. Approaching 60 knots. 75 knots and pulling back on the yoke. I am flying today with honeycomb yoke and Bravo throttle quadrant. I'm conscious we're at 3,300 feet, so not pulling back and making the climb too steep. Past the end of the runway, gear up. and now flaps up. Continuing to climb, I'm going to look for something around 6,500 feet, and I'm going to follow the valley to the west. Prepared version 5 is running fairly smooth, just occasionally the odd micro pause. For those interested, I'm running an i7 8700K and a 2080 Ti graphics card. My prepared settings are turned up relatively high, but not all the way, in part because I am recording as well as flying, and we can take a quick look at those once we land at Griez. I do have Orbx's Langklaas Europe installed. The scenery is good, but I must say that Microsoft Flight Simulator for GA flying, well, they've spoilt us. Now just passing 6,000 feet, so landing light can come off and fuel pump can come off, and just adjusting the mixture as we continue to climb. Coming up on 6,500 feet, which will be our cruise. The valley is now swinging to the north. We're going to follow that towards Griez and start reducing power and come almost immediately off cruise and start a gradual descent towards the airport. Adjusting my trim, I want a slightly nose down pitch. The valley opens up in front of us and the airport is just in front of that body of water. We should have it visual shortly. Just putting in a little bit of carb heat as we descend, just for a short period of time. I'm not going to leave the carb heat on, it's not cold enough for that. There's the airport in front of us. Griez Airport is at an altitude of 2,257 feet and the runway is a dirt and gravel strip. Picking up a bit of turbulence now as we come out of the valley. We're going to fly a right-hand traffic pattern for an approach to the runway. First stage of flaps coming in. Speed 115 knots. With the Comanche you just got to keep your eye on the speed at all times because it can run away from you. Preparations now for landing. Landing lights and fuel pump on. I'm going to leave the mixture where it is. Let's get the gear down. And now turning on final. I may have cut this just a little bit too fine, but I should be far enough away from the airport to correct it. Speed 90 knots. Altitude is about 1,000 feet above the airport elevation. Pulling back on the throttle, I'm a little bit too fast at 100 knots. I want to approach at about 80 knots and over the threshold at about 70. Let's now put in another stage of flaps. flaps are fully down. "75 knots. I must say, that's pretty majestic scenery. Time to stop looking at the scenery and concentrate on the landing. We're going to slow down and turn around, flaps away. We're going to have a quick look at the terminal, but we won't be stopping for long. Our next destination is Lima Sierra Tango Sierra, San Stefan, situated in the base of a fairly steep valley and a little bit more of a landing challenge. In the meantime, welcome to Griez. Lima Sierra Golf Tango. Just taking a little bit of artistic license here and just cutting across the snow so we can have a quick look at what Orbx has provided at this airport, and then we'll be on our way. For those of you that may be interested, these are my prepared settings used during these flights. One point to note is my level of detail as well as texture resolution would normally be one notch higher when not recording. We've taxied back and we're lined up on the runway. We're going to be making a fairly sharp turn to the right to head through that gap there, to head toward San Stefan. Adding a bit of throttle, let the revs build up a little bit. Hold her on the brakes till I hit about 2000 RPM and then release the brakes. "60 knots. Oh, that crosswind's quite heavy. Caught me by surprise, just correcting. Keeping an eye on my airspeed, I don't want to drop below 80 knots. Now stabilized and turning to the right to head for that gap. Gear up. I must say that the clouds in Prepared are looking so much better, and these are default. And flaps up. One big question is, what does the future hold for Prepared? In the current market, which is arguably developing faster than it ever has done before, Lockheed Martin's Prepared certainly faces a number of challenges. In the home enthusiast market, it is certainly the most expensive sim, and its policy of charging full price for each version upgrade is also a deterrent for future purchases. Currently, Prepared enjoys a fairly loyal customer base, but this loyalty is driven by a substantial investment in both time and money in add-ons in this simulator. As the user base shrinks, so shall development by third parties. Prepared is 64-bit and now DX12, so it has the fundamental tools required to develop the sim and take it to the next level. Right now it remains tied to the old ESP platform. and the limited CPU utilization available within that platform itself. Arguably, the expectations in the market are changing, and I would suggest that Prepared at its default level just doesn't meet those expectations. What was good a few years ago no longer cuts the mustard, as it were. The other significant point to note is that Prepared is licensed from Microsoft. And does Lockheed Martin have an appetite to develop the sim? Do they need to? Or is it currently adequate to meet their commercial requirements? As part of their licensing agreement, they go to some degree to emphasize it is not for entertainment. Well, I guess time will tell. San Stefan, directly ahead of us in the valley, landing lights on, fuel pump on, pressures and temperatures looking good. Now the big question is whether I can get down fast enough. I'm at 6,500 feet and cutting the power, coming off the throttle and putting the nose down. Gear is down to help me reduce speed. Currently at just over 120 knots. Let's hope that Lockheed Martin expedite the development of Prepared. A faster rate of innovation is required, in my opinion. Take VR for example. It remains extremely limited and hasn't really moved forward from its first introduction. Anyway, enough from me, back to the flight. A little bit of side slipping just to lose some altitude. Despite being a nice long runway, I'm clearly still too high. I'm just not going to get down. I'm going to have to go for a go around. Power on, flaps one notch back, but I'm going to leave the gear down for now. I'm going to gain some altitude and then do a sharp turn back towards the runway. This is where the Comanche's power comes in very handy. Flaps up another notch. Right, let's see if we can do a quick about turn. Not strictly legal, but I'll give it a go. Power coming off and flaps all the way down. I'm still too fast at 95 knots and now 90 knots. "70 knots, power all the way back and let her settle down." I think we'll just call that a firm and definite landing. Not the best admittedly, but it's the landing. Little bit of ice build-up on the wings, need to keep my eye on that. We're just going to taxi back to the buildings and have a quick look and then loop back round onto the runway again for a short 4 nautical mile hop to Semen airport. Now this landing will be a challenge. It is an asphalt runway, but it's only 579 meters long at an altitude of 3,060 feet. not ideal landing for the Comanche 250. Looks like we've got a Cessna Caravan there, parked outside the air services, but we can't stop and chat. We've got an airport to get to, so let's get on our way. Would be nice to see a bit of snowdrift on the taxiways, make it more realistic. This is going to be our shortest hop. The airport is literally at the end of the high ridge on our left. Let's push the throttles forward and let's get going. Knots, and gently pull back on the yoke. Stay aligned with the runway, not a lot of room for mistakes here. We're not going to climb very high at all. As I said, the airport is literally just round the corner. Monitoring my airspeed and my climb. I don't want to get above 4,000 feet, otherwise I'm going to be too high for a landing straight in. Advice Semen, Lima Sierra Tango Zulu, and we should have the runway visual any minute now. First stage of flaps. There's the runway directly ahead of us, landing gear down and flaps to full. The biggest danger for me here is the airspeed. A go around with this high terrain is going to be very difficult indeed. knots, I want to be over the threshold at 70 or below. I'm a little bit fast, but I'm landing. I'm going to be using my brakes for this one, I can see that. Quite a lot of alpine runways have a fairly long runoff on the runway, giving pilots a slightly better odds-on for margin of error. Flaps away, and we're going to be parking at the terminal, as this is our third landing and fourth airport in this tour. So today we've had a chance to have a look at all 4 airports included with the Saanan Airport pack, available from Orbx via Orbx Direct. Considering the scenery and all the airports are freeware, it's great value for money. So that's my first real look at Prepared version 5 with 5.1. And as I mentioned before, it's more an evolution and not a revolution in terms of development and progress for this sim. Prepared still has many thousands of regular users, and I just hope that Lockheed Martin will up the ante, if you like, in terms of development. There's no doubt that flight sim has entered a new era. Nonetheless, it's been an enjoyable and exciting experience. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you found this useful and informative. I'd love to know what your opinions are and what you expect for the future for Prepared. Please leave your comments below. Take care of yourselves and bye for now.